You don't walk down the street and see a woman being raped and do nothing. You don't see a child being molested and do nothing. You don't see a kitten being stomped and do nothing. And you don't sit there and watch a whale die and take his picture and do nothing.
What a beautiful, admirable thing that he does out there defending animals that cannot defend themselves.
Captain Paul Watson is a controversial environmental activist and unlikely reality television star. He's been in trouble with governments on at least 3 continents.
You're a badass. I think you're fantastic.
There's no difference between the Japanese poachers in the Southern Ocean and elephant poachers in East Africa, except for the fact that the elephant poachers are black, they're poor, and they get shot for what they're doing.
If you want to stop pirates, you need pirates to do it.
Here we are, destroying this incredibly intelligent, sentient creature. We are insane.
Thank you. I've never been to Nantucket before. I never had any desire to come here. This is the island of monsters that sent out a fleet of murderers to take the lives of the greatest and most intelligent species on this planet. So I'm happy to say that the monsters are gone. But I think it's an appropriate place to talk about a story that changed my life, and it goes back to 1975. I was a co-founder of Greenpeace, and we came up with this idea to protect whales. We were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, and we thought that all we had to do was put our bodies between the harpoons and the whales, and they wouldn't kill the whales. So Robert Hunter and I, in June of 1975, we found ourselves in a small inflatable boat in the Pacific, 60 miles off of California, in the middle of the Russian whaling fleet. And suddenly we found ourselves in front of a harpoon vessel that was going at full speed, and in front of us were 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time that the harpooner got ready to fire, I would get in his way and block his harpoon. And this worked for about 25 minutes until the captain on the whaling vessel came out and screamed into the ear of the harpooner. Then he looked at us, brought his finger across his throat and smiled, and that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to be of much use that day. And suddenly the harpoon was fired, an enormous explosion. It flew over our head and hit the backside of one of the females in the pod of sperm whales. And she screamed. It was something like a woman screaming. It was just unnerving. And suddenly, after this fountain of blood went all over the place, suddenly the largest whale in that pod slapped the surface with his tail and disappeared. And he swam directly underneath of us and hurled himself straight towards the harpooner on that Soviet vessel. But they were ready for him with an unattached harpoon, and at point-blank range, he pulled the trigger, struck the whale in the head, and that whale screamed. There was blood everywhere. He fell back into the sea. He was rolling in agony on the surface. And as he did, I caught his eye. And suddenly, he stopped, he dove. I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight towards us. And he came at us really fast and out of the water, so the next move was to fall straight on top of our little boat. And as his head rose out of the water and I looked into an eye that was right there, an eye the size of my fist, what I saw in that eye changed my life forever, because I felt that the whale understood what we were trying to do. Because I could see the movement he made, the effort he made to pull himself back. And he began to slide back into the sea. I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. Could have killed us. Chose not to do so. I'm personally indebted to that whale for the fact that I'm alive. But I saw something else in that eye, and it was pity. Not for himself, but for us, that we could do something like that. And I said to myself, why are they killing these whales? You don't eat sperm whale meat, you kill them for oil. And the Russians especially had a need for it because it's a highly heat-resistant oil. Their need was for the construction and building of intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's one of the best oils they could use on that. And I said to myself, in the middle of this Russian whaling fleet, here we are, killing these incredibly magnificent, self-aware sentient beings for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me, we're insane. We're ecologically insane. And from that moment on, I said, I'm going to do everything in my life to protect them. And so I don't do this for people. I do it for them. 1986, we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet in Reykjavik Harbor. And I had some colleagues in the environmental movement come up and said, just want to let you know that what you did there was irresponsible, criminal, reprehensible, and unforgivable. I said, so? I said, John, didn't sink those whaling vessels for you. I didn't sink them for any human being. We sunk them for the whales. Just find me one whale anywhere on this planet who disagreed with what we did. I promise you we won't do it again. Because I left Greenpeace then, as I was a co-founder of Greenpeace, but I left in 1977 to set up Sea Shepherd because I got tired of hanging banners. I got tired of taking pictures. I got tired of witnessing death and doing nothing about it. So that's why we set up the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. We're not a protest organization. What we are is an interventionist organization, and we're dedicated to stopping illegal exploitation of marine wildlife. Now everything from plankton all the way up to the great whales. And so today, we have a fleet of 12 ships. Right now, there's 250 volunteers out on the ocean, and they're intervening wherever we can make a difference. Our vessel, the Bob Barker, we named the boats after the people who sponsor the boats. Bob Barker gave us $5 million to buy his boat. That boat right now is off of Gabon, working with the Gabonese authorities to go after illegal fisher operations, and have arrested quite a few fishing vessels. Last week, working with the police in Timor, we arrested 6 Chinese fishing vessels, and they're now being investigated. 2 months ago, we stopped a Chinese vessel in the Galapagos with 6,900 sharks on board, and the Ecuadorians took action right away. Captain got 4 years, the officers 2 years, the crew 1 year, $6 million fine, the confiscation of their vessels. And of course, the most famous thing we've been doing is intervening against the Japanese whaling fleet in the Southern Ocean, and we've done that since 2005. The Japanese are international criminals when it comes to whaling. That is the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. You don't kill whales in a sanctuary. They're in violation of the International Whaling Commission. They've been condemned by the International Court of Justice. They've been condemned by the Australian Federal Court. They were fined $1 million. They refused to pay it. These people are criminals. But it's Japan. They have money. They get to do whatever they want to do. And in fact, 2 months ago, they passed new laws, new anti-terrorism laws. It's now an act of terrorism if you take a picture of a dolphin being killed in Taiji, Japan. It's now an act of terrorism if you approach a whaling vessel. And they invest $50 million to subsidize this whaling fleet. And they're provided with military technology in order to find the whaling vessels. So it's a very difficult thing to keep up with. But I'm proud to say that since 2005, we saved 6,500 whales. We've lowered their quotas. And of course, the perception is that we are the bad guys. We are the pirates. So we get called pirates. Doesn't really bother me, because one thing about pirates is they get things done. They're not encumbered. They're not encumbered by red tape and everything. But we also operate within very strict guidelines. And at 40 years of operations, we've never caused a single injury to a single person. We've never been convicted of a felony crime. And but I am on the Interpol Red List. Now, the Interpol Red List is for drug traffickers, serial killers, and war criminals. And I'm the only person in history to be on that list for the crime of conspiracy to board a whaling ship. So that also indicates the power of the Japanese government. But there is a European Parliamentary Committee that's working into the abuse of Interpol, and mine's one of the cases that they're cited on doing that. So the Japanese thought that by stopping me, which I'm not allowed to travel now, they thought that by stopping me, they could stop Sea Shepherd. But then they discovered something. Sea Shepherd's not me. Sea Shepherd's a movement. We're not even an organization. So right now, Sea Shepherd is in 45 different countries. They're all separate entities. They all contribute to the operation of those 12 vessels. A year and a half ago, we went after the ice fish poaching fleets off of the coast of Antarctica. Ice fish is actually sold as Chilean sea bass. Not sustainable in any way at all. And most of it's caught illegally. So what we did was we located the fleet. We got the most notorious poacher of all, a vessel called the Thunder. And we began a chase. We chased that vessel for 110 days. It was the longest pursuit of a poacher in history, from the coast of Antarctica all the way up to Sao Tome off the west coast of Africa. We chased them until they almost ran out of fuel and they couldn't go any further. So what the captain of that vessel did was he sunk his ship in front of us in order to destroy the evidence that was on board. But as it was sinking, we boarded the ship, we got the evidence. The captain's now in prison, the officers are in prison, and the company was fined 17 million euros. So. Now, one of the criticisms is that we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be taking the law into our own hands. And they're right. We shouldn't be. And we wouldn't have to do it if the governments of the world would simply do their job, which is hold up their responsibility and their obligation to the international treaties that they sign. But there's a lack of economic and political incentive on their part to do anything about it. Whaling could stop tomorrow if the United States simply applied the US Department of Commerce regulations for any country in violation of the IWC. They never do. Every year they send a strongly worded letter of condemnation to Japan or Norway and Iceland, and every year they just drop it in the garbage and ignore it, and everything goes on because trade deals, trade agreements govern all their activity. Well, we can't upset the Japanese, we can't upset the Norwegians, but basically what they're doing is enabling criminal operations. We have one motto in Sea Shepherd, and that is, if the ocean dies, we die. We don't live on this planet with a dead ocean. It is the single most important issue on the planet, the survival of life in our ocean, the diversity in the ocean. Consider the Earth as a spaceship. That's what it is. We're a spaceship. We're traveling around this incredible galaxy. It takes 250 million years just to make one orbit of it. In fact, the planet's only done it 20 times. The last time we were at this place where we are now was 250 million years ago in the Permian extinction, when we lost 97% of everything. Now we're in the sixth major extinction, the Anthropocene, and who knows where that's going to go, but it's certainly having an impact. But every spaceship has a life support system. It provides the food, it provides the air we breathe, it regulates climate and temperature. And that life support system is run by a crew, not humans. We're passengers. We're having a great time entertaining ourselves. The crew that run the ship, well, we're killing them. And there's only so many crew members you can kill before the whole machinery begins to fall apart. I was asked a few years ago, the Fox Network was giving me a hard time. They said, you actually said that trees and worms and bees are more important than people. I said, yes, I said that. He said, how can you justify that? I said, quite easily. They don't need us. We need them. If we lose worms and bees and trees, we don't survive. We lose phytoplankton, we don't survive. But we need them. So that's the first thing you have to understand, is to keep these creatures alive so that we can continue to live. Phytoplankton populations have been diminished in the world's ocean by 40% since 1950. Why? Because we killed off so many marine mammals, especially whales. One blue whale every day defecates 3 tons into the ocean, heavily rich with nitrogen and iron, and that are the primary nutrients for the phytoplankton. So you diminish the whales, you diminish phytoplankton, you diminish zooplankton, you diminish fish, you create all sorts of problems. We simply are not intelligent enough to understand those relationships between all of those species. And that's going to be our undoing. People say to me, how can you ask young people to risk their life to protect a whale? This is unacceptable. And that's a really strange question to me, because we ask young people to risk their lives all the time. We ask young people to die for religion and for oil companies and for real estate. I think it's a far more noble pursuit to risk your life to protect a species from extinction or to save a habitat, and all this for future generations. The reason for this is that we are anthropocentrically oriented. All we really care about is us, and that's not a recipe for survival. Every single religion on the planet puts human beings as the center. That's anthropocentrism. We have to look at it from a biocentric point of view, living in harmony with all other species. And if we can't do that, we're simply not going to survive. There are 3 basic laws of ecology. The law of diversity, strength must be found in diversity, and the law of interdependence, all species are interdependent, and the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth, a limit to carrying capacity. And if we don't live by those rules, we will go extinct. And again, this is like the most important thing we can develop. But because of our anthropocentric mindset, we don't even think about that. Nobody really thinks about the fact that if phytoplankton disappears, we all die. That's the last thing on everybody's agenda. So our fight, we go into battle armed with cameras, but we also intervene directly. If they don't stop, we stop them. And so we sunk quite a few ships. And like I said, we've done that without injuring anybody. And last year, again, we found a Chinese drift net fleet in the Indian Ocean. Drift nets have been illegal since 1997. So we began to chase it. We chased it all the way, a whole fleet, we chased it all the way to China. And suddenly we come to the boundary on the Chinese territorial limits. And suddenly there was a Chinese fleet, Navy fleet. And the fishing boats said, help us, we're being pursued by pirates. And so the captain on one of the naval vessels said, what's going on here? And we said, we caught these guys fishing illegally, using drift nets were illegal. And we sent the evidence to Beijing. And the captain said, bring them in. We brought them in. All those captains went to jail. So the thing is, the laws are there. So presently, right now, we're working in partnership with the Mexican government to protect the endangered vaquita. The vaquita is the smallest porpoise in the world. If we weren't there, it would now be extinct. We've confiscated 450 nets from poachers over the last 3 years, and we're going back again in 2 months. We're in partnership with the governments of Gabon and Tanzania and Liberia and Sao Tome to stop the European and Asian fishing fleets which are pirating everything in their water. And by the way, the pirates of Somalia are just impoverished fishermen who were put into that position because of the real pirates, the Asian and European fishing fleets, which stole everything from them, and nobody really seemed to think too much about that. We're in partnership with the government of Ecuador. We're in partnership with the police in Sicily to protect the marine reserves there. And we found that these are the really good partnerships because we can provide the ships, we can provide the volunteers, and they can provide the authority. And that helps tremendously. So we work in partnership with governments inside territorial limits. Outside of territorial limits, well, that's the Wild West. So we pretty much are on our own out there. But, and it can get dangerous. We liberated 800 bluefin tuna off the coast of Libya in 2011. And of course, we were shot at and everything else like that. But it was nothing more exhilarating than to dive into those nets, cut them open, and we'll see 800 bluefin tuna run out like racehorses into the Mediterranean. And also to expose, what they're doing. Unfortunately, governments tend to support the criminals, because, well, you're going to cut off the money. 40% of all the fish that is sold anywhere in the world has been caught illegally. We've got to get to the bottom of why that is happening. Right now we have one of our boats that's permanently, working all summer with opposing the fish farms in British Columbia. And we're working with the First Nations there. They're now occupying 2 of those fish farms. And we're exposing what's happening because of the domestic farming of salmon is an insidious threat to survival of life in the ocean. The spreading of parasites and viruses from farm salmon, an exotic species, to native species, and incredible source of pollution. And by the way, if you eat salmon, farm-raised salmon, which I notice is served here, that color of that fish isn't exactly real. They have a dirty white flesh, so they put dye in the food pellets to get that color. So we're trying to expose all of that and the fact that they're heavily overdosed with growth hormones and antibiotics and all sorts of things. It's basically poison. But the real problem is that it's threatening the survival of the wild salmon populations around the world. And so we go where people don't want us to go, and we say things that people don't want us to say, because that, in my opinion, is the business of a conservationist, to rock the boat, to say things that people don't like, and to do things that people don't want to be seen done. That is our business. We're not popular, but we don't really care. We're not into the popularity contest. I refer to ourselves as the ladies of the night of the conservation movement. People agree with us, but they don't want to be seen with us in the daytime. So, but right now, like I said, we have 12 ships out there, and they're making a difference in every way. And anybody can join the crews. They're all volunteer crews. Right now, from 25 to 30 different nations. And I think that there's nothing more satisfying to go out and actually do something and know that Thousands of whales are alive because you intervened, and thousands of sharks are alive because you've intervened. That really is a sense of achievement, a sense of satisfaction, which is why we get so many people wanting to join our ships and everything, so which we're quite pleased about. Politically, like I said, we're not very popular, and we get called names like eco-terrorists and everything. I've never worked for Monsanto, so I don't think it's a relevant thing. But and of course, we're called pirates. So when they started calling us pirates, I said, okay, we'll be pirates. We'll get our own pirate flag, and we'll do pirate things and everything. Kids love it, and everything. So we got our own Jolly Roger and everything like that. And so it's been highly, highly successful in that respect. So I would encourage you to follow us on the social networks and what our ships are doing, where they are, and if anybody wants to crew or participate, just let us know, and we'll find a place for you on board one of the vessels. Thank you.